Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist whose influence shaped much of 20th century thought, left behind a body of work that reaches far beyond psychology. He wove together philosophy, mythology, religion, and personal reflection to shed light on the mysterious depths of the human psyche. His career, spanning from the psychology of dementia praecox to civilization in transition, traces an extraordinary journey. Beginning as a clinician deeply rooted in Freudian psychoanalysis and evolving into a visionary who redefined how we understand the mind. In seminal works like Psychological Types, The Red Book, and Mysterium Coniunctionis, Jung examined the dynamic between the conscious and unconscious, the individual and the collective, and the timeless dance of opposites. This culminated in his idea of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming one's authentic, integrated self. Taken together, these writings reveal a man whose thought and life were inseparable, shaped by personal crises, enriched by encounters across cultures, and driven by an unending search for the soul's deepest truths. Jung's intellectual journey began with The Psychology of Dementia Praecox, published in 1907 while he was a young psychiatrist at Zurich's Bergelslee Clinic. Dedicated to Freud, the book reflected Jung's early embrace of psychoanalysis, applying it to the disordered minds of patients then diagnosed with dementia praecox, Kreplin's term for schizophrenia. Through vivid case studies, like a woman who believed she lived on the moon or a man obsessed with apocalyptic visions, Jung introduced his concept of complexes, emotionally charged, autonomous fragments of the unconscious that disrupt the personality's unity. He viewed these not merely as signs of illness, but as manifestations of a deeper psychic energy, foreshadowing his later redefinition of libido beyond Freud's purely sexual framework. This work, combining clinical precision with word association experiments and rich patient narratives, cemented Jung's reputation. Yet even here, in its tentative hints at mythic patterns hidden within madness, we see the first glimpse of the path he would follow. By 1912, with the publication of Psychology of the Unconscious, Jung broke decisively from Freud, sparking the rift that would define his career. Analyzing the fantasies of Frank Miller, an American woman whose journal recounted visions of serpents and heroes, he argued that the libido was not merely sexual, but a creative life force expressed through symbols that connected personal dreams to ancient myths. Drawing on sources like the Rig Veda and the Epic of Gilgamesh, Jung proposed the idea of a collective unconscious. This is a shared psychic inheritance underlying individual experience, populated by universal figures like the mother, the hero, and the trickster. This ambitious and controversial work, written amid his own intense intellectual and emotional upheaval, enraged Freud, who dismissed it as unscientific. This freed Jung to chart his own course, a psychology of transformation that would lead to his concepts of archetypes and individuation. In the 1920s, Jung sharpened his vision with Psychological Types, a systematic study of personality that remains one of his most influential contributions. Drawing on clinical cases and historical contrasts, like Nietzsche's bold extroversion versus Schopenhauer's brooding introversion, he divided consciousness into two attitudes, introversion and extroversion, combined with four functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. He illustrated how the psyche seeks balance, as in patients whose rigid logic masked repressed emotions, a dynamic he likened to Goethe's harmonious genius or the Buddha's contemplative inwardness. More accessible than his later, more symbolic works, this framework offered a practical way to understand individual differences. Yet even here, in its suggestion that opposites, like a thinker's hidden feelings, must be integrated, we see the beginnings of his deeper focus on wholeness, a theme that influenced later tools like the Myers-Briggs and laid the groundwork for his evolving theories. Around this same period, Jung's two essays on analytical psychology marked a turning point in his thinking, capturing his break from Freud with both clarity and urgency. Written during a time of deep personal crisis, when he was experiencing the intense visions later recorded in the Red Book, the two essays, on the psychology of the unconscious and the relations between the ego and the unconscious, introduced some of his core ideas. These included the personal and collective unconscious archetypes such as the anima and the shadow, representing the repressed or denied parts of the self. In one case, a man's dream of a threatening figure revealed hidden aggression, illustrating how the ego must engage with the unconscious in a transformative dialogue. Here, Jung began to frame individuation as a heroic journey, not just a path to healing, but to growth and integration. These writings, deeply shaped by his own psychological upheaval after parting with Freud, blend clinical depth with philosophical insight drawn from sources like Goethe and Taoism. Jung's mid-career masterpiece, Symbols of Transformation, was a profound reworking of his 1912 text, now enriched by decades of insight and his experiences recorded in the Red Book. What began as an analysis of Frank Miller's fantasies evolved into a sweeping exploration of psychic renewal. Jung traced recurring symbols, serpents as the Ouroboros, heroes as solar gods, across cultures, from Osiris in Egypt to Vishnu in India, arguing that such images reflect the libido's evolution from raw instinct to spiritual expression. In one case, a patient's vision of a devouring mother echoed the Hindu goddess Kali, showing how the collective unconscious can shape personal crises through mythic forms. Dense and layered with meaning, the book, infused with alchemical themes of death and rebirth, served as a bridge between Jung's early symbolic work and his later theories. It portrayed the psyche as a crucible of transformation, a powerful vision forged during the cultural and psychological upheaval of interwar Europe. Published in 1953, The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious brought together multiple essays, crystallizing Jung's theory of universal psychic patterns, figures like the mother, the child, and the shadow, all rooted in the collective unconscious. One striking case, in which a schizophrenic described a solar phallus rising from the sun, later matched an ancient mythic text, convincing Jung that these archetypes exist beyond personal experience. He explored the anima in a dream of a mysterious singer, and the mandala in a patient's artwork, showing how these symbols appear across cultures and help orient the psyche toward healing and wholeness. By weaving clinical examples with mythological parallels, from Greek goddesses to Native American tricksters, Jung argued that archetypes shape both imagination and psychological growth. More accessible than his dense alchemical writings, this collection solidified his influence and resonated with post-war thinkers like Joseph Campbell, reflecting Jung's lifelong search for deeper meaning in the aftermath of global upheaval. In Jung took his ideas further, presenting the self, the archetype of wholeness, as the ultimate goal of psychological development, symbolized by Christ but shadowed by the Antichrist. Writing in his 70s, he framed this vision within the larger context of the Age of Pisces, which he believed was drawing to a close. Drawing on astrology, Gnosticism, and alchemy, where the philosopher's stone symbolized the self, Jung explored 2,000 years of Western consciousness. A patient's dream of a golden child illustrated this grand synthesis on a personal level, threading individual experience through a vast historical and symbolic tapestry, from Babylonian fish imagery to a coming Aquarian age. Rooted in his own near-death experiences, became a deeply esoteric reflection on modernity's fragmentation and a call to reconcile opposing forces, an expression of the lifelong quest that defined Jung's work. Synchronicity, written with input from physicist Wolfgang Pauli, explored the mysterious realm of meaningful coincidences, like the famous case of a scarab beetle tapping at Jung's window just as a patient described one in a dream. Jung proposed an acausal connecting principle, suggesting that mind and matter could align in ways not explained by cause and effect. Drawing from the I Ching, quantum physics, and even an imperfect astrology study, he viewed such moments as archetypal eruptions, where the unconscious breaks through into the external world, such as dreaming of a friend at the exact time of their death. Though brief, this provocative work challenged the dominance of causal thinking in science and reflected Jung's lifelong fascination with a deeper, unified reality. Born from themes first explored in the Red Book and sharpened by Pauli's scientific insight, Synchronicity bridged Jung's psychological theories with his cosmic vision, sparking debate and cementing his reputation as a thinker unafraid to cross boundaries. The structure and dynamics of the psyche brought together essays offering a comprehensive map of Jung's core concepts, the ego, the unconscious, and the flow of libido. Through vivid examples, like a patient's snakebite dream interpreted as a call from the shadow, Jung illustrated how unconscious material surfaces in symbolic form. Essays such as The Transcendent Function explored how the tension between opposites gives rise to meaningful symbols, like a golden bridge, often emerging through active imagination, a technique Jung developed during his own psychological crisis. Though dense, this collection is foundational, presenting the psyche as a self-regulating system, a model refined over decades. It offered a more structured, almost mechanical view of inner life, providing a counterbalance to his more symbolic and mythic writings, while still echoing the alchemical process of transformation at the heart of his work. Jung's alchemical trilogy began with Psychology and Alchemy, in which he interpreted the alchemical process from nigredo, blackening to rubedo, reddening, as a symbolic map of individuation. Dreams like a businessman's vision of a hidden gem, or the Rosarium Philosophorum's image of a king and queen uniting, reflected the inner journey toward wholeness. Written during World War II, Jung saw alchemy not as primitive science but as a psychic projection, with its serpents, mandalas, and mystical imagery appearing spontaneously in modern patients unaware of alchemical texts. Alchemical studies expanded this exploration, examining figures like Paracelsus and Zosimos, and symbols like eternal water and the trickster god Mercurius, guides to the unconscious and emblems of psychic transformation. His final major work, Mysterium Coniunctionis, brought these threads together into a sweeping study of union through opposites, sun and moon, ego and shadow, culminating in the emergence of the self. With its deep analysis of the Rosarium and Jung's own visionary experiences of cosmic union, it served as the capstone of his lifelong alchemical quest. The Red Book stands apart in Jung's body of work, a vivid, deeply personal record of his inner journey during a time of psychological crisis. In illuminated, medieval-style pages filled with mythic visions, he chronicled encounters with figures like Philemon, his inner guide, and Salome, the symbol of eros and transformation. Born from the breakdown that followed his break with Freud, its dreamlike imagery, apocalyptic floods, and the Nos accept sermons ad mortuos formed the foundation of many of his later theories. Kept private during his lifetime, the Red Book was a crucible of creativity and insight, only revealed decades after his death. Memories, dreams, reflections transformed this inner material into autobiography, recounting childhood visions, a dream that shattered a cathedral, and a near-death experience in 1944. Together, these works offer a reflective coda to Jung's life, revealing a man whose personal journey mirrored the psychological truths he spent a lifetime exploring. Civilization in Transition marked Jung's outward turn, applying his psychological lens to the crises of the modern world. In essays written between 1918 and 1957, he interpreted Nazism as the return of Wotan, the ancient Germanic god, emerging from the collective shadow, and viewed UFOs as modern psychic mandalas, symbols of an unconscious yearning for wholeness. In The Undiscovered Self, he issued a passionate plea for individuality in an age of mass conformity, a message shaped by his encounters with Eastern spirituality in India and Native American traditions in Taos. His concern for the individual continued in the development of personality, where he traced the path of individuation from childhood dreams, like a dwarf symbolizing inner potential, to adult relationships, including a couple's psychological growth through marriage. Blending case studies with cultural critique, these late works offered a final synthesis, a vision of personal development as the key to collective healing in a fractured world. Jung's work traces a sweeping arc, from clinical beginnings to mythic depths, from personal crisis to universal insight, shaped by a man who dared to confront his own unconscious. Whether through his apocalyptic visions in 1913 or his near-death experience in 1944, Jung found in his inner world a reflection of the shared human soul. His central ideas, archetypes as inherited psychic patterns, the collective unconscious as their source, and individuation as the journey toward their fulfillment, arose from a rich blend of patient dreams, cross-cultural mythology, and his own visionary experiences. Through a century marked by war, technological change, and spiritual confusion, he offered a psychology of depth, calling us to confront our shadows, listen to our symbols, and strive for wholeness. His legacy is not merely a body of thought, but an invitation to study, yes, but more deeply to live the unfolding story of the psyche, just as Jung did until his death in 1961. Thank you for watching. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button and stay tuned for more content on the philosophy series.